The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of this protracted experience of death. And I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation forever. What's happening? Benton here, rolling out of a Love's truck stop in Joplin, Missouri, after overnighting at the Petro across the way. Went ahead and topped off the fuel. I don't know that the trucking company is in financial problems, or I don't know that they are struggling financially. However, based on the nature of the industry, and I got an email yesterday that said your paycheck statements, not the paycheck, but the thing telling how much money you're going to get. So that's normally goes out Wednesday morning. Said you'll get that tomorrow after 2 p.m. That was the only information provided. So I went ahead and cruised over to Love's and keep the truck fueled up, which I typically do anyway. But be even more vigilant just in case the old fuel card starts to not work. And then what happens is the company, in attempting, and this is just broadly speaking in truck driving, the company in the short term trying to keep the doors open, in the short term, all they can do is turn the bills of lading, proof of deliveries over to factoring companies to get as much cash as possible. And so you get into situations where some of the drivers who have, if they have enough money, they're silly enough to maybe pay out of pocket for the fuel. I've read stories of that. And you get into, and this says something about the type of person that ends up in long haul trucking. Many folks can be convinced to continue working without pay. And so probably what happens is whoever absolutely refuses to continue working without money, they get paid, if at all possible. Like, yeah, I've got freight on the trailer. Y'all want to get paid, right? You got to pay me. I'm reasonable. Hey, cash out me my $257 for today. I'll happily work today. Because I haven't, at this point, they're either going to pay me my full paycheck or they're not. Yeah, tomorrow you can do the same thing. $257 to my cash out. Make any difference to me? You have to pay me, Jack. But mistakes can happen. People move on to other jobs. They get fired. What have you. Shout out to Protected by the power and meaning in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. And that bears repeating. And I'll be specific, shout out for the protection and the deliverance from wicked spirits, unclean spirits, demonic spirits on an ongoing basis. Spiritual attacks of all types. No weapon formed shall prosper. Boy, howdy. Uncovering and walking the righteous, perfected path that lies within. Best believe. What I'm realizing is that regardless of the intent, and no live chat today. We're at a zero listening. It's all right. Shout out to replay crew. Probably going live chatless for a while, although invariably I'll get in a hurry and forget. That's coming, right? At some point. Is it coffee time? That's the question. Yeah, the Christ thing, I know what I know. And I'll talk about it, I'll discuss it, I'll weave it into conversations. And then what I've noticed is there's other folks that want to sort of put their 2 cents in here and there, which is great and fine. No issue there. But then I start to see in my observances, my observation, that some of this, what I hear and what seemingly gets directed my way, it seems to serve to sort of open the door to old Benton working with some of these concepts outside of the framework of Christ. And I'm here to tell you that's not going to happen. Anybody who wants to worldwide is free to come to this channel and listen to me talk. And until the comments annoy me, they're happy that people can leave comments. I have not been reading them lately. Just, I don't know that busyness covers it, but like yesterday, drove 680 miles or whatever it was, and then more or less just laid around the truck and got some really good rest for the body, and in conjunction with the healing and restoration. And the thing about that is, I think some folks have a notion of, well, healing, if Christ heals and these other forces are involved in healing, well, that's just sort of a magic wand gets waved, and then person feels bad and then now they feel better. It's like, no, actually I mostly felt fine. And, my routine is structured, and my diet and these supplements are set up to support the healing of, specifically at this time, the large intestine, the colon. And what I'm realizing is energetically and emotionally, the healing of that organ or that area ends up being, quite an emotional, spiritual undertaking. So, maybe some nightmares early this morning, maybe, damn near had a panic attack at one point, but then because of the high levels of meditation and, able to recognize what was going on. But then some of the thoughts were appropriate, because I probably would have slept in, and then I realized, well, I can leave early. And that first delivery, because of where it's located, if I sleep in and roll in, I'll get there right when everybody's showing up to work, and it'll be pandemonium. And, I'll be trying to back in off the street, and, it'll cause a traffic jam. Because as we know, especially in areas like small town Oklahoma, everybody goes to more or less the same places all at the same time. And they leave those places all at the same time. Last time I arrived, in the afternoon, people were coming to and fro, picking up their honey bunnies from work. And there's no mercy on a truck driver. The assumption is, I have to just perfectly know how to back this thing up, right? But, it might take me a few minutes, so I'll get there early and at least be able to back into the first dock. And a few early birds may come through, but it won't be just. Downside is I won't be able to see what I'm backing into, but that's fairly normal. That happened. And second stop, I remember I only had one piece, so I talked him into just letting me take it off the trailer, because that was such a hard dock to hit. But I think I'm going to have to blindside it, just because it will be the time of day when The way people drive, Oklahoma is the slowest drivers on the highway, but they're driving around some little office park in an industrial area. They're dive bombing that corner at 45 miles an hour. It's like, I'm trying to back in off the street, blocking all of that. The thing about blindsiding is I'm able to do it. It's like a last resort because you can't just complete. You have no knowledge at a certain point. You can't see anything, and for me, I do the royal we. It's like, and then another thing about truck driving, every time I get out, people start freaking. Oh my God, he's getting out to look. I want to start telling people, this is what they trained us to do, right? We're supposed to get out and look. But it freaks people the fuck out. And again, NPC normies normalize everything that is not incongruous or incongruous. So, in their world, a truck driver is just perfectly able to do all of these maneuvers. And then it's like, okay, why is it getting out and looking? And I've talked about before, the way I drive a truck, my setups, the way I maneuver, it's so different than what they're used to seeing because of my retardation. Super high functioning retarded person in ways. It's like, yeah, you can make fun of Rain Man from the movie Rain Man, but if card counting had never existed, he would have invented it. Like who can just go to a casino and start counting cards, right? Yeah, there's lots of things to make fun of him, but but I have my own version of inventing card counting in blackjack. Spiritual warrior genius. There's a reason why I've accomplished things in this so-called life. Breakfast cereal, Mikey likes it. There's a reason. The reason old Benton's been successful by his own definition. So back to the Christ talk. Tell me, am I going to get there? Yeah, 5:06. Good deal. And, shouldn't have any problem getting 2 hours off duty. Make sure I don't run out of clock. We need to make 3 deliveries today, which shouldn't be too much of a problem, realistically. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good, man. Well, let me not bounce back and forth between too many topics just yet. The large intestine talk, and I'll do my best not to become too graphic. So please bear with me. We'll try to avoid any sorts of descriptions. But what I find interesting is the emotions, and if you look at what Chinese medicine supposedly associates, actually the lungs and the bowel, the lower bowel rather. And so, dealing with some certain emotions and then the associated thought forms that I just don't have a lot of experience dealing with, as it turns out. That's been interesting. And I don't really know how to explain it or describe it beyond that. I think you get more into the esoteric, the so-called occulted, the deeply buried, the things that even I probably prefer not to face or consider. That seems to be necessary to experience. Again, the dead flesh, the protracted experience of death, and to heal the dead flesh, animated death warmed over style. I mean, realistically, what's going to be involved in that? And the emptying of the wickedness, that's visited upon the flesh, right? To let that, and then you get into root chakra, lower chakras, root chakra, and then, the releasing. And we've lost this term, but when I was a lad, a common refrain in society, on television, even in conversations, was, "Oh, anal retentive." A specific type of person, anal retentive. maybe I've answered to that at times, potentially, or at least, people said it around me enough and I was oblivious. So looking back on it, maybe they meant me. But, like I said, also on TV, the idea of, somebody being so uptight, the old cliche about put a coal up their ass and they'll turn it into a diamond type shit. Well, that's the area, that's the rectum, but then that's general vicinity of the lower bowel, which is really, it's ascending colon, uh, transverse colon that goes across the abdomen and, paralleling ground, and then descending colon to connect to the rectum, damn near killed them. I could feel it, man. And I've been thinking about maybe doing one of these fruit fast cleanse things. I think I'm out on that. I've decided pretty much anything that beyond 3 days of turning the digestive system off for longer than 72 hours. I did 17 days on the master cleanse once, and I really botched that transition back to normal, so-called normal eating. That wasn't any fun. I think I'm good on all that. So, but I'm certainly going through some of those same type of detox symptoms. I woke up in the middle of the night and it's like comically bloated, like one of them. Anyway, I won't even say what it looked like. And then, being able to understand and accept it's all for the best in the long run. But then this truck next to me, I don't know if this woke me up or what, because I passed out. So I ate another watermelon like last week, passed out fairly early, maybe about 4 p.m. or so. And woke up at like 9:30. And I think the guy next to me, maybe his truck was doing a regen. It cranks up the RPMs on the engine, and he more or less, super trucker, more or less had, big old pipes and like open exhaust and all this. It's fucking loud. Put my earplugs in, it was still loud. And then, back to expecting the accepted, accepting that it's a truck stop, but it's a really large truck stop. And, why he's right next to me, I have no idea, but it's just what happens. And visually, my truck might look like one. There's a couple of empty spaces on the other side of me, and then if you just looked at it, it might look like somebody parked their truck and went home for home time. So he might have actually been trying to not bother people. So and then the old Benton would have freaked out to some extent, got angry, and potentially, ruined some of the healing. I managed to fairly easily keep my cool, put the earplugs in, and then thankfully the regen is over. Wasn't quite as loud after that. That's what it was. You can't, again, it's a truck stop. You can't complain too much. That happens. But, yeah, good stuff. I start sleeping with the windows open though. Little side vents, little stopped up. See, I got the headache, the detox headache. Then managed to go back to sleep. Woke up at what, like 12:30, and then went back to sleep till 1:30, but had a nightmare. Silly nightmare. That's probably that real good healing. I expect. I don't take my time. I can already see it's going to be a slow start. A little bit of piss and vinegar this morning, a little bit shot out of a cannon. You know, testosterone's up to some extent. Not that it's ever really down for me, but yeah, I get through these first two stops and it should be smooth sailing after that. You never know in trucking, though. But yeah, so back to the Christ stuff, I've realized that a lot of, talking about expecting the accepted at the level of spiritual attack and persecution. Now, whether this is their intention or not, whether this is their intention or not, I've recognized from my perspective that a lot of what's directed towards me seems to be tied up in maybe incentivizing me away from the Christ framework. And that's just never going to happen. The indoctrination goes too deep. Thankfully, nothing ever happened to me to make me be mad at God, so-called air quotes God or Christ. And, that's something I've been very critical of with the so-called Christians is the idea of, I don't ever see where any of them's angry at the criminal. They don't go talk to the criminal, Satan. But then, at some point they'll talk about struggling with their so-called faith and, blaming God, right? So when they right themselves and maybe repent and all of this, and again, not my concept of God, what they seem to, God, the Father God, man in the sky, the Bible, from their perspective. But then they seem to be having these resentments toward, and then it gets directed at that, right? At that phenomenon, which, that to me, that doesn't make any sense. I've never thought that way. I've never felt, why have you done this? Again, air quotes, so-called God, like what, it's never occurred to me to even think that way. But then here's another reason why I will not get away from the Christ framework. Blessings, just the absolute off the charts blessings, healing, deliverance, protection that has provably occurred in my so-called life. Benton likes it, this protracted experience of death. And I know and trust that that will continue. For what I am is the blessing or is blessing itself. So there's nothing. And so when I talked about sort of starting to just very minutely started having some fear, reacting out of fear just ever so slightly. Well, see, that's a violation. That's to treat blessing as if it could be a curse, right? There is no forsaking. That can't happen. This idea of why have you forsaken me? Like, who is you? Number one. Number two, like, that sounds like some emotional bullshit to me. Did you talk to the criminal? Because if anybody's responsible for that, wouldn't it be the so-called wicked one, Satan? Now, I understand people can be like, well, look at the story of Job. It's like, if you considered my servant Job and all of this, but I don't know any Christians that look at that and say, well, if I was Job, I'd have a bone to pick with the big fella. It's like, no, that's the, accept the mission, put on the so-called whole armor of God and, unsheathe the sword of the word of God goeth out of the mouth like a sharp sword, when necessary. Born everything I could possibly ever need is always at the ready. What I am can never lack. That's true, and that is true knowledge of self / self-realization. And within the Christ consciousness, and specifically the Lord Christ Jesus, that's the transcendence. That's a phenomenon. That's the transcendence of the flesh, of death itself, or a form, death within delusion, in the physical form, right? And so, of course, the realm is promoted as, look at all of this wondrous natural beauty. Yeah, it's mundane. It's enjoyable. So are video games. Hell, I enjoy driving a truck at times, like right now. I mean, do we need to go on and on and on about the wondrous splendor and beauty? Or, I'm sure I could come up with a bunch of other words for it, but the idea of the human body being so fantastic. Well, we don't treat it that way. I just went into a truck stop to wash the sleep out of my eyes, and fell in there, making him some nachos. Had the fucking cardboard tray, the chips and the cheese dip, whatever else he puts on there. I never was a nacho guy, but growing up as Americans, we all have our versions of that, I'm sure. That's death, man. There ain't no enjoyment in that. I wouldn't eat that for $1,000. Like, for real. There was a time when I would have had my own version or whatever that was. Maybe a hot dog was, a truck stop hot dog, maybe. I wouldn't eat one for $1,000. Because how can I receive healing and restoration of the lower bowel and then put that run that through the lower bowel? Whatever a hot dog is coming out of one of these industrial facilities, whatever that is. No thanks. But yeah, blessed, guided, and protected my whole, protracted experience of death. So why wouldn't that continue? Well, it will. It does. It shall. And then I get into thinking, about these, maybe getting an email, and it doesn't need to be the person sending the email. Their intention is not, it's neither here nor there. And that's biblical. If people want to try to sign me on to the Apostle Paul, well, the Apostle Paul talked about no matter how pure his intention is, he serves evil anyway. So according to what a Christian claims to adhere to, they could be spiritually attacking me from the purest of intentions. And it's in their book. That ain't my book. So how can you talk about the Lord Christ Jesus? Because I can talk about anything I want to talk about. That's why. Have you talked to the criminal? This idea of, well, check the boxes, adhere to the doctrine and the dogma, and then your reward is in heaven after this so-called life. Bullshit. Whatever heaven is contained within what I am. This is the land of inversion and confusion. That's ass backwards to think that heaven is a place beyond what I am, and then if old Benton's a good little boy in this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, maybe the big man upstairs will sign off on to me getting to hang out and, some version of a cool kids club up in the sky. Fuck you. Fuck you. Not you, the listener. You know what I mean? Fuck that. Right? This place exists in relation to what I am. And so antithesis, of course, from day one, will have me confused and everybody else confused into considering things to be quite the opposite, to then craft, a graven image of myself to create an identity in relation to this place. So this place exists in relation to what I am, and then it immediately indoctrinates Benton, the performer, within the delusion, the idea that it's possible to individuate off of that indivisible force when it's not, because that would be a kingdom that could be divided against itself, and then it cannot stand. So that's not possible. It can't be divided. See, you can't have a Father, Son, and Holy Ghost outside of the context of this world. That ain't possible. I hate to break it to you. Which is actually one of the things the Muslims have correct when they're like, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Jesus ain't the Son of God, and that not in the way that Christians mean. That doesn't mean they're correct about other things. But at the end of the day, this is simply not possible. Or more correctly, yes, it is possible within the context of delusion and this realm, this world of death and game of lies. And it's also possible all the ridiculous nonsense that we see happening in America, in the so-called economy, with the political system, social media, internet, each person's daily lives, just the sheer absurdity. It ain't possible. This is a nightmarish, garish, ghoulish, ugly, nightmare-inducing shit show. Right? Abandon ye hope all who enter here. Some whatever that is. I have to look that up every once in a while. It's from Dante's Inferno. It's phrased oddly, in my opinion. It's close enough. And in fact, the realm may make it seem like an abandonment of hope has happened, but guess what? What I am is so-called hope. I can't lack. And that's probably, when I talk about the human, contained within the human is seemingly something I've called a hope station. And the major thing about the hope station is that most people seem to assign an improper value to the hope that is generated by their hope station. Right? But that seems to be contained within the spirit of what I am. See, that's again, if you are what I am, if and so back to the spiritual attacks and the turning away from Christ, that's not going to be possible. And so some of it is, I see messages and posts from other YouTube channels and people that post in my comments or on my live chats, and who aren't wrong about what they're saying. And maybe it's not directed at me, but YouTube seems to be directing it at me. And it's like, yeah, I understand the context of, you are not your thoughts, and the mind doesn't, really exist, and all of these things. But at the end of the day, what I'm detecting is that intellectually curious, or somebody, who is astute in critical thinking and thinking for themselves, seemingly has a desire to engage in some sort of ongoing intellectual discourse, which is completely fine. But I'm unwilling to engage in any way that in the long run, I don't need other people to go along with my notions of Christ, but again, no weapon formed shall prosper, regardless of the intent of the individual. Ultimately, all that matters here is me and my experience. Hate to break it to you, folks. The way this realm, this world of death and game of lies is structured, there's only one relevant factor. It's you and your experience, period. Nothing else matters. Now, obviously, how I interact with other beings, my behaviors, right? That all matters. What I'm saying is that in the final analysis, what anybody else does or doesn't do means nothing. And that's outside of me, and it can't have a meaning. It can't have a meaning in my life. Only the internal can have a meaning in my life, against so-called life. There can't be a team. There can't be come together. There can't be a we're all in this together. Every single individual is completely and totally alone at all times. If you are what I am, because that's an indivisible force. But guess what? That doesn't mean loneliness. That means oneness. That means total fulfillment, complete power, total expansion and creation perpetually forever. It never started. It never ends. It cannot be born. It cannot die. Can it experience this realm? Apparently. I also experienced, most likely on behalf of the healing of my lower bowels, some disturbing nightmares and some, verge of a panic attack for about 5 minutes. So what? What's the meaning of any of that? It has no meaning. It's not real. It's it's a fever dream, a hallucination. But remember, the inverted world wants to convince that, well, of course, the waking life of today, that's very serious and real, and stakes are high. This is nonsense. And my assertion is, my speculation is that and this is not going to happen, if more and more individuals were to so-called wake up, here's how individuals will be waking up. You won't be able to talk to them about politics. You won't be able to talk to them about conspiracy. You won't be able to talk to them about much of anything, because they will already understand the pointlessness of it all. Other than, somebody like Benson in the context of the performance, which is I enjoy, I figured out long ago, my path is progress. I enjoy various practices working, within the dead flesh, mastering the dead flesh, and, again, an ascension, right? And so what is Christ? Christ is the resurrection of the risen, ascended Christ consciousness within the present form, which means located inside of the dead flesh. And it's that phenomenon, once again, the phenomenon of Christ consciousness, then sort of takes over in a way, although consistent with its own nature, right? And so, in being presented with the opportunity to give in to a panic attack, it's like, well, Christ consciousness can't experience a panic attack. What I know myself to be can't experience a panic attack. Not without waking dreams, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again, and something imagined You know, we can talk about stress, fear, anxiety, and panic. That's not real, so we don't even know what that is, meaning, and I don't mean we as a group, I mean the royal we. My concept of all of that could literally be a figment of my own imagination. And in fact, that makes as much sense to me as anything else, right? And then I think that's proven out in, you know, if we look at the horrors of anxiety, fear, depression, stress, strife, you know, sorrow, sadness, worthlessness, hopelessness, um, you know, and then religion. Who blames Satan for that? Well, everything I just described, that is antithesis. That is the so-called Antichrist. That's this world. That's what this world promotes. Now, it lies to you every day of your so-called life and tells you that, in fact, the world is here to support you, and it blames the world on air quotes so-called God. And nobody blames the enemy, or more correctly, that which makes an enemy of what I am. But when something makes me its enemy, it creates a competition. What I am doesn't create struggle, strife, friction, or competition. See, it doesn't know how to do that. But it's game. It's game. It's ready. And the realm is so good at lying, skating, and deceiving, it has most of us thinking the opposite. You know, that's our own competitive spirit. If that's, you know, if the individual is competitively inclined, and make no mistake, I'm Benton's one of the most competitive motherfuckers of all time. And that's not anything to be proud of. That's just what it is. Always been that way. I mastered whatever competition is. I transcended all of that very early. By the time I was a teenager, if somebody beat me in a competition, I was genuinely happy for them because I knew they did something. Shit, you deserve to be congratulated. And some will say, "Well, that sounds arrogant." I say, "I don't care how it sounds." And I would tell them, "You don't know what humility is." I've had people try to lecture me on my own so-called arrogance and pride here in the so-called truth community, and they don't know. They don't know what humility is. Because what they're describing as arrogance and pride or vainglory is a lack of humility. What people run around calling feminine, oh, that's feminine. And in other males, no, it's not. It's a lack of masculinity. Why are you insulting womanhood and femininity? It's not feminine. That great samurai swordsman Musashi, when he wasn't chopping heads in feudal Japan, y'all have called, not y'all, my apologies, they'd have called him feminine. And he would have been, well, you're damn right. How do you think I'm chopping all these heads? Every one of these heads I chopped was an expert in the masculine. You know why they got their head chopped? Because they don't know nothing about the feminine. They grew as far as they could grow through the yang, and then they refused to grow through the yin because they didn't want to get peer pressured and called names for being feminine. Musashi chopping heads, boy. If I'm saying his name right, and if any of that ever happened. Guess what? It didn't, because none of this is happening. This live stream's not happening. Is that disorienting enough? Well, you better figure out how to be comfortable with disorientation and chaos You're not gonna do that through the masculine form. Yang don't know a motherfucking thing about the mastery of chaos. Chaos is Yang's undoing. I know. Mushashi looked that motherfucker in the eye and said, "Hey, this is chaos right here, Bubba. This is you in my arena, partner. What's chaos? Feminine. I can't think of too many things more chaotic than two fellers with impossibly sharp swords circling each other, trying to figure out who's gonna blink first. Shing! And to choose to take that on. Most of you don't know what this is, and that's okay. That's fine. Guess what? Parts of me don't know what the fuck this is. And the less the individual is in touch with true knowledge of self, they really can't know what this is. Only by understanding one's own self is it possible to understand this place. So, of course, anybody who comes into some understanding of the nature of what they are will have their own individuated, discrete understanding of what the realm is. Right. So, yeah, tell me that there's thinking is basically your data is an error, when it comes to thinking. But then wants to have a conversation with me about how there's no real such thing as thinking. It's like, okay, how do we do that without thinking? Right? Is this a koan? Koan, however that's pronounced? Is this one of those Zen koans? Koans? I don't know how you say that. What is this? An enigma wrapped in a riddle? What are we doing? Because, spiritual warrior genius. Spiritual warrior genius. Spiritual warrior genius. Fucker's trying to speed me up so he can speed behind me. Well, here's what you get, Bubba. 68. You get 68, partner. Yeah, no, fuck you. I ain't playing your game, buddy. We're not playing your game. That's some bitch shit. That's bitch. That's a bitch move, see? He's got a 75-mile-an-hour truck. This is what I mean about being a sitting duck out here at 71. It's 75 on the turnpike, and he's got a 75-mile-an-hour truck. And so he's trying to get me to speed up so he can speed behind me. And he chose to do it. He sped up while I was passing him, and I had a truck up my ass. So he's slowing everybody down. Fuck him. See, that's what a person is. That's the nature of the flesh. That man will dominate man unto man's own injury. So tell me again how wondrous the human experience is. Tell me how great it is to be a man, right? Mankind, right? Why is humanity in the state it's in? Because there is no meaning, there is no value, there is no substance to coming together as humans and bringing forth a wondrous splendor of creation. This is war. This is war. And it's an individual war. Every warrior is an individual having an individual war. Because if the spirit, if the what I am is going to enter into a delusion that's not even possible and have an individuated experience, that's what it's going to do. It's off to, oh, and we're going to do this whereby the group must win the war. The group must be successful. Motherfucker, what I'm identified with can't lose doesn't know the concept of defeat. Therefore, there is no application of an external. We're all in this together. No, we're not. No, we are not. I'm not in a group with my father. I'm not in a group with my mother or my sibling or my bloodline or my so-called kin. None of that's a thing. I hate to break it to you. But guess what? I like how that feels. Suck it up, buttercup. Suck it up, buttercup. Who cares about your stupid feelings? I got my own stupid feelings. They're my problem. Your stupid feelings are your problem. And that's the plight of every human. So, of course, the realm seeks to collectivize. StreamYard freaked out in my back. See, here's a gigantic billboard for an injury lawyer, and he's got this very strong masculine visage, and he's got a big old fist. He's in a broad shouldered, barrel chested, in a conservative style suit. Got a shaved bald head, looking like Vic Mackey from The Shield, and he's making a big old fist. But then I see the injury lawyer billboards and we're out in the middle of nowhere on the turnpike. So see, that appeals to a certain type of person. And then in the cities, the ads are a little different. And if you're divided within yourself, this realm ain't going to have no problem keeping everybody divided outside of this. What I'm saying is humans can't come together. So of course this realm says, well, of course you can. And it provides examples. It's a bunch of lies. Look at American history. Other than some wars, especially if you talk about so-called neoliberalism in the U.S., which I'm no expert on, but of course that started with who? Kids? Reagan. And now all these people who think who would like that billboard over the other billboards because it's a strong, authoritative image, and they, as people, resonate with strong authority, right? See, some of us challenge strong authority because we're challenging type of people. It's what we do. See? Well, that's liberal. Challenging authority is liberal, kids. Well, if the authority is Satan, and Satan is the enemy. And as an individual, you respond to strong authority, and you don't feel comfortable challenging so-called strong authority for your own purposes. I hope they show up and ask for their taxes. I'll say, why are you talking to me? Did you talk to the criminal? And be like, who? What do you mean, the criminal? Oh, the bank. I say, there's thousands of dollars in a bank account somewhere. Did y'all go talk to the criminal bank? I'm sure they'll just let you have my thousands of dollars. I mean, you're welcome to it. You need me to sign something, maybe I will. But did you talk to the criminal? Oh, no, you're here talking to the righteous man, making me offers. Offered to put me on the IRS payment plan. No, I'm good. You got a dungeon for me somewhere? Oh, you showed up thinking I could fear a dungeon. Well, it's already a soft gulag. How am I going to fear a hard gulag? Motherfucking Valley of the Shadow of Death. Protracted experience of death. I'm at this point, I'm looking for an excuse to go sit cross-legged under the metaphorical Bodhi tree. Fuck's sake. Fucking Bodhisattva of the Bayou, Jack. Y'all don't know what you're dealing with. They might tuck tail and go the other way. And know what I am. Because they don't know what they are. If they are what I am. And that's the crux of the whole Jesse Lee Peterson fucking trolling. He's just trolling people based on, some approximation of true knowledge of self. It's mundane. It's boorish. It's within the bounds of fair play. I don't know. Maybe my audio's glitching, or maybe this is just too much. Maybe this is too much. Might be too much for y'all. Get the fuck away from me, you creepy fucking weirdo. Oh, perhaps the creepiest of all, the Sprinter van, a white Sprinter van. Yeah. Even worse than the if he's hauling freight. Get the fuck away from me, buddy. And it's all for me. Ain't none of this for anybody but me. I don't care how it sounds. If there's not a bit in there, now we're back to the chaos, the disorientation, the discomfort. And a human will do almost anything to avoid chaos, discomfort, disorientation, and the enemy knows it and uses it against you at every turn. And guess what? That is a weapon that forms and does prosper. How you going to transcend that? You're not going to seek out bitten and get taught how to do it, are you? They pissed him off at a college, went to quit yelling out for him to do lot cuff taxi. And he apparently busted out a copy of The Catcher in the Rye and just read the whole fucking book. Then in the movie, there's like one person stuck around to the very end. That's called walk in the room. I'll walk the motherfucking room, Jack. I've been public speaking many times and could tell that somebody was starting to resonate with my message so strongly they were starting to try to vibe with me and align with me. And I switched it up and intentionally said a bunch of liberal sounding stuff that I knew they couldn't agree with, and they fucking they leave every time. No, we can't get with that. Then you can't get with my program. We think for ourselves on my program. We don't shut our mind off, sir. You think you're going to be on a team with Benton? Well, maybe you will here and there for a specific purposes. I don't join shut their minds off. Now, maybe for employment, right? But I mean, in a vacuum, if there's going to be collaboration, we're going to have free thinking. I'll take my ball and go home, Jack. We ain't scared of ideas around these parts. Ignorance can't possibly be bliss, because if that's possible, then that means knowledge may not be power. Because if knowledge is power and we all say, well, that has to be true, and then they want to say, well, so is ignorance is bliss is true, well, then I can create an equation whereby nirvana or happiness or contentment is tied up in a state of disempowerment. Now we're pretty much to the preamble to the book 1984. Ignorance is peace, or sorry, war. What is it? War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Yeah, like I'm gonna come out here in Orwell 1984 myself. I don't think so. That which makes an enemy of what I am loves to see it. Say shit. Done Orwell and Kaczynski, y'all bitch asses. And then we got Freedom Grower Dick from the so-called truth community, 4 to 5 years on, looping into problem solving, talking about, well, we should do this and maybe we could do that. I say, well, what about Kaczynski, sir? What you're referring to can't possibly ever exist, because if there was a Ted Kaczynski, he was one of the smartest motherfuckers of all time, a math prodigy, by the way. Idiot savant. Some version of a Rain Man. Oh, you're not going to study that? Because, oh, that's right, the government, the government made sure to attach the crimes of a criminal psychopath to the writings, so most of you can't read it. You can't study it. That's cowardly. That's to be a coward, right? Oh, look, here's the lefty playbook, the communist playbook of the so-called enemy. If you think you're a conservative, it's called Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Oh, well, look, the enemy was smart enough to dedicate the book to Hitler on page 1, guaranteeing that nobody who considers themselves a good goddamn card-carrying conservative will ever get past the first page, because they can't flip to the next page because it says dedicated to Lucifer. Okay, well, now the enemy knows how to hide its plans and its battle plan in plain sight from you. And all I did was read it over 10 years ago, and I watched you conservatives. If I ain't talking to you, I ain't talking to you. I watch y'all, number one, fall for the tactics in that book, and then number two, actually internalize those tactics and start to behave based on those tactics and don't even know what you're doing. That's the whole idea of the moment Benton identifies a problem, you immediately say, well, what's your solution? That's directly out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, dedicated to Lucifer. And the first time we really saw that strategy played out in mainstream America was Obama at the town hall. Although I'm sure it occurred before that, but at least in the modern parlance or postmodern parlance. Well, what's your solution? That's directly out of Alinsky. Rules for Radicals, dedicated to Lucifer on page 1. And now MAGA so-called conservatives love to hit me with that. Well, what's your solution? And you know what I love about that is I didn't have an answer. And it didn't bother. The only thing that bothered me was that they didn't understand why they were saying what they were saying. But then I realized, well, you know what? Eventually I'll be able to retort. I say, oh, I'm glad you asked. I've already applied the solution. It's inside of me on behalf of me for my own purposes. And until other people do that same process within themselves, none of this can be fixed. It's not possible. So run that up the flagpole and see who salutes it. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it, buddy. She gonna tell me nothing. And then this Nap Town that makes excellent, fantastic A+ level documentaries about the Thorpes, Grace and Ben Thorpe. And I don't know who these people are, not because I'm better than that or because they're not famous enough. I'm not a boomer in that sense, but you know, I don't know who. I can't even remember the lady's name, but she just had a debate apparently. I guess she's a big feminist or something. Hater. And I guess all right. I guess we're back. Hello. I guess it was that Anarchist Kasparian from Young Turks versus some woman, some feminist. I don't know. Again, I couldn't really tell what it was all about. But shit, I'm almost there. That's how long I've been yapping. Gonna have to wrap this thing up. Yeah, I guess I gotta go. I'm gonna eat this fruit. Well, I can't go. I can't eat the fruit yet. I'm gonna have to delay the fruit until after I back in customer. You know, I'm realizing more and more, you know, people's brains don't even really work, a lot of them. I don't even know what points I wanted to make about that, but it's appalling. And then trying to call that a debate. I guess there's some internet show now, Word War or something. It's like a debate show, and I guess Grace went and attended it. She met Gavin McInnes or something. I'm way out of the loop on the Thorpe lore. I don't know what's going on. But it's very interesting. Interesting times, to be sure. Yeah, back to the spiritual attacks. I can tell when the realm is doing everything it can to you know change my opinion or my view towards Christ. That's just not possible, and I see it. I see it in my thinking at times. It's like, well, that ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna happen. But in the influence, right? The influence. Yeah, where I'm going is basically Tulsa, but it's not Tulsa proper. And going to OKC, but it's not OKC proper. In Amarillo, Texas. And tomorrow's what the guy in Connecticut called Lubach, and I chose not to correct his pronunciation because he's probably never going to. I don't know if he ever even leaves the Northeast, so there's really no point coaching him up on how to pronounce Lubbock, Texas. It's funny talking to people in a very expensive, Connecticut's one of the most expensive states, but it also is, it's almost always number one for median household income, Connecticut. And people still have an idea that there's like affordable parts of the country. It's I hate to break it to you, man. It's everywhere. It's expensive. It's just here's more expensive. Same thing with Seattle or San Francisco or California or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, you can go to the middle of nowhere, Mississippi or Arkansas, but there's nothing there, and it's so undesirable. And even then, food's still expensive. Groceries are expensive. And then I see Nick Johnson doing a video about, the economics of today and talking about how in 1980, the boomers had it easy and, and then he talked about dual income. He said, a dual income household could easily do all of these things. And it's like, well, number one, in 1980, that wasn't really, maybe in the cities, maybe on the West Coast, but in Arkansas. I remember 1980 well enough. Yeah, I was quite young, but people really, that wasn't viewed as a good thing that your wife has a job. If I'm grown as a man with a family, right? And then also Nick is like, well, or the breadwinner could have one full-time job, and yeah, that was sort of true, Nick, sort of. But here's the difference that people have forgotten. Them credit cards that everybody lives on, that did not exist in 1980. Consumer credit, the 2026 version of consumer credit, did not exist in 1980 at all. Why? Because by 1977, interest rates, we're talking like, I think again, I'm not a fucking accountant, I'm not in finance, but I believe it's the Fed, like overnight, lending window or whatever, that the Fed overnight rate, 18%. So that was like when the bank had to get money. That's what they're paying, on a short loan, right? To access what? Liquidity. Why? Because inflation was so out of control. Volcker, head of the Federal Reserve, or was he Secretary of the Treasury? Secretary of the Treasury, yeah. And I guess again, I'm not an expert on this, I'll have to look it up, but they credit Paul Volcker with all this. Volcker. So again, always do your own research. So I will tell you things that are wrong from time to time. That's just what happened. And I think anybody that doesn't confirm it is a fool. But it finally, a person, and this is how the system always promotes things, it wants to be able to blame somebody if it doesn't work out. But, it's portrayed as, okay, well, Volcker finally just said, fuck this, we're jacking the rate up and we're keeping it there however long we have to get rid of all this inflation. So they kept cranking it up and kept cranking it up and kept cranking it up. And so they raised it a few times recently, and it got up to what, 4.5%, 5%. And then now, it's the whole thing is Trump wants it back closer to zero. He wants rates lower and all of this. So that rate they're talking about, and again, I'm not even worried about the parties or the personalities, but what the media is saying Trump wants to be low, even when it's high, it's like 5%. It was 18% in 1977. What that means is no credit cards. Yeah, rich people, sure. Guess what? A rich person back in 1980 was probably paying their shit off every month. People were not living beyond their means. They were saving because they were getting what, 6%? Maybe even more by the early 80s, just for putting money in a savings account, whatever it was. Got to make sure I don't miss my exit here. And so Nick Johnson wants to look at 1980 through the lens of today. You could not transport 2026 people to 1980s America. They couldn't live in it because there was not a bunch of cheap bullshit everywhere that everybody was buying all the time. It did not exist. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I have a set of $10 wireless earbuds. If you convert today's $10 into what 1980s equivalent, which does not even buy you 1 gallon of gas, well, probably, I don't know. It's a good question. I'd have to run the number. Maybe it would. I don't want to talk out of my ass here, but so go to the inflation calculator, figure out what the fuck amount of money in 1980 comes out to be $10 today, you could not buy anything and listen to it. You could maybe, what, other than what, a single, like a fucking a 45, right? An 8-track, maybe a used beat up 8-track player, maybe at a yard sale. I don't think you could get a portable transistor radio at a yard sale for today's equivalent of $10 because somebody would just say, fuck it, I'll just give it to my kid. You know, with the old timey mono one earpiece. Y'all remember that? You got your hands on one of those when you was a kid, right? If you were around my age. One of them just magically appeared in my hand at a certain point when I was like 6 or 7. Right? What do you think that costs new in the store in today's money? That's $30 in today's money. Brand new in the box for one of those. I'm guessing, but I can't be too far off. Anyway, gotta make sure I catch this exit. And so America and Americans are so addicted to cheap, affordable bullshit and subscription services and pay as you go. And, well, I have it automatically drafted out of my bank account. None of that existed. Oh, did they close my exit? This is interesting. Further adventures in truck driving. Just they closed one of the 2 lanes. Yeah, it's open. Good deal. Sometimes one of my dispatchers called me and thought I made a wrong turn or something when I was going to a delivery. It was, kind of a tight time frame. I was like, no, man, my exit was closed. It's like, what do you mean? I said, I got there and it was physically unavailable. So I had to, took me a couple of minutes to figure out plan B. It was impassable, at least for the time being. Can't do nothing about that. I guess that's why folks want to have a CB, but it's like I can't make heads or tails out of whatever they're talking about on that CB. Anyway. Hard Rock Casino. I think that's where I went and played Pot Limit Omaha that one time. That's where I went. It's funny. I probably, maybe, if I really, really went nuts and both days and went down to the very minute on my 11 hours, I maybe could have got all the way to here yesterday. That's all right. No big deal. Now I need to go to the bathroom. There's nowhere to stop. It's always fun. What was I talking about? I can't even remember. Oh well. We might keep it going for a while. I guess I can keep rambling. Hey, what? No, totally lost it. Now we're in a situation where almost every car is just making a beeline for the ass into my trailer. 4 lanes, no traffic. They seem to be confused that I'm going 58 to 65. It's like, yeah, I know y'all, man. I know y'all trying to fall in love with that bumper back there. I already know. Or they. Traffic was way down yesterday. I can tell you that. Not a lot of economic activity, I suppose. Oh, I was talking about economics. Yeah, credit card. So, not just anybody could get a damn car loan back in 1980. Not just anybody could get a home loan. See, it's all very strict and restricted. Because even the corporations and the banks couldn't necessarily get money. That's what got the inflation under control, was that it was hard to get money. And so my experience, what I remember of the 80s was nobody had any money. Money was hard to get. And so, yeah, it goes farther because everybody's trying to get it. So if my dad gave me $5 to go to the mall, which actually that was really didn't happen a lot, but whatever money I had to take to the mall, those stores were competing for my $5, and I wanted to stretch my $5. Right. Well, when the money ain't worth hardly anything, and people who don't know anything about how things work, they just assume, well, Trump is strong and Trump wants a strong dollar. Well, why does he keep saying he wants a weak dollar? Google is this Donald Trump in favor of a weak dollar, and it will confirm, yes, he's spoken many times about a desire for a weaker dollar. So 1980 was work really hard and get paid a small amount of money, but it actually still seemingly buys things. Whereas today, it don't really seem to buy much of nothing. Have you noticed? Right? It's becoming Zimbabwe in my fucking my cash reserves, right? My actual physical cash. I'm just looking at it. And part of it, maybe it's because it's in 20s, but I'm looking at it more and more. I'm like, this is motherfucking Zimbabwe money. Because if you just look at, if I pulled 4 G's and fucking $20 bills out of my pocket, it kind of looks like a lot of money. But when you start thinking about what you can actually do with it, it's like, yes, like Zimbabwe money. It's like, this is you know, add a few more, paid $5,000 for my last car. It's like, yeah, pull 5 G's out of your pocket. If it's in 20s, it kind of looks impressive. It's like, yeah, it's not. This is a used Nissan Versa hatchback, low miles. The money don't hardly buy nothing. So yeah, go back to 1980 so you can get paid in 1980 money, but then all of this easy money, easy credit ripoffs, I'm telling you, wasn't a thing for the most part. And hell, that show Good Times about the black family living in poverty in the inner city, that's part of the jingle for the song, for the show, Easy credit ripoffs. That's some local merchant who wants to sell appliances or whatever and has got devised some kind of scheme, predatory lending, right? And then they just come take your shit because it's too, it's too fucking, it's such a bad deal. Either the person can't pay it back or they finally realize it ain't even worth it. Just have them come pick it up. I had a friend in Hot Springs. His whole apartment was stuff he got from Rent-A-Center or whatever that he paid double or triple retail for, but he didn't give a fuck. You know what he did? 2 full-time jobs and whatever side gigs he could do. He was just early. See, that was late 90s, early 2000s into the mid 2000s. This guy had 2 full-time jobs and was always looking for side jobs, right? And meanwhile, now you're like your average person more and more is living that way. He just early to the party. He arrived early to the party. Gee, I'd love to be able to send some of these people to 1980 and they say, boy, we sure do enjoy working one full-time job and paying rent, saving up for a used car and yeah, gas is relatively expensive because remember 1980 was the absolute peak adjusted for inflation of gas prices in this country. Yep, 1980 adjusted for inflation, never been higher. I think it's maybe been tied a couple of times. Minimum wage, I looked this up the other day. In 1980 was $3.10 a gallon, and a gallon of gas in Arkansas was $1.25. So 1 hour of minimum wage work would not even buy 3 gallons of gas. Today, the minimum wage in Arkansas is $11 an hour, and gas is about $2.50 a gallon, maybe cheaper. Let's just say $2.50. That's damn near 4 times, almost 4 times. But everybody wants to act like everything's so expensive compared to that. Oh, the boomers had it easy. They had it easy because they weren't yet brainwashed to waste all their money that now increasingly it just doesn't have the value it used to have. But then people waste it on a bunch of nonsense, which is fine. I've got my own versions of that. But in 1980, after you work your 40 hours and you rest up, and you're not stressed out. What now? No phone, no doom scrolling all day, no dopamine, no so-called dopamine hit, right? No social media, okay? No video games to speak of. 1980, not really. I remember ColecoVision and in television. That's. Meanwhile, Google what that costs in today's money. Fucking damn near $1,000, probably in today's money for just go to Sears or whatever and buy a fucking ColecoVision or an Atari 2600 or whatever. Atari 2600 probably $500. Either way, there wasn't So when people are like, "Oh, life was better back then," yeah, because people had no choice but to make their own entertainment on some level and do their own shit and have hobbies and do things, right? And guess what? We also did. We watched a fuckload of TV. That's something else when I listen to these Gen Z content creators. They want to blame everything on the internet and social media. They haven't quite understood. It's like, yeah, well, Google, go watch a 45-minute YouTube video of TV commercials from 1987 and realize that somebody my age saw some of those commercials 5,000 motherfucking times. And I told that to a Gen Z, and he said, "Well, I don't know anybody that watches commercials." I'm like, "Sir, you've missed the entire point. You think like, what do you mean you don't know anybody that watches commercials? You know all kinds of people that have watched the same commercial thousands of times. So, like, what are you even talking about?" See, he's proving he has no frame of reference for what shit used to be like. And most people that lived it have forgotten what it was like in the first place. See, I can still remember what it was like. It sucked much of the time. 1988 sucked ass much of the time. That's just what it was. We had a snowstorm in Arkansas. Our power was out for 2 weeks. We had our fucking garage door cracked to let the cat in and out. We couldn't get our fucking main car out of the garage for 2 weeks. Had to drive my dad's old fucking Volvo he bought because he was into old Volvos and new Volvos. But I could go to church and that thing, you know. I mean, air quotes had to, but regardless. Oh, I'm remembering now that where I'm about to go is going to be about to be fraught with peril, and because I remember this intersection and it's all fucked off. So it's another reason to get here early. Although I might accidentally be coming in the proper way. I think last time I took a different route. And I remember it being all crazy. Oh yeah, I think we got lucky, maybe. Let me see, where's it sending it? Oh yeah, we're good. Although that's the wrong street name. Hang on, let me make sure I'm actually going the right way. Have I confused myself? It's gotta be the place. Hang on. No, that's it. It's just I got a confusing address. I'm turning onto a different street name. So that was, and I've been here before, thankfully. These places are hard to find. Oh yeah, see, ain't nobody around. Of course, now some folks will probably magically appear out of nowhere, but that's okay. Yeah, I made the right move here. Showing up early. This would have been a couple more hours. This will be fraught with peril. It looks like some folks are already at work across the street though. Anyway, I'll take a quick break and be back shortly. Manners. Break. I called it. 100% of the time, doing what I'm doing, I was backing up, and I got to the part where there's still an entire lane is open, right? And so I'm about to start swinging my tractor into that other lane, which will block the road. And I look to the right, and there's just a pickup truck, perfectly appears. So now I have to get out and wave them on, right? And again, it's not a real realm. But anyway, I'll be back.